Hi there, I'm Monty Rogers, down here at Gold's Gym, Venice, California. I know that the glute training is kind of awkward, or, you're talking about your butt, kind of awkward, but it's extremely important in today's bodybuilding. Having peeled glutes really makes you shine. I like to start off with really deep squats. I believe you have to squat deep in order to completely engage the glute.
Okay, let's hear what he just said. He said you have to go deep in order to fully engage the glutes. So the question I have is, what does he mean by deep? That his definition of deep isn't as deep as one could go. And I agree with what he's saying. In other words, a full squat, a deep squat doesn't have to be butt to heels. Some people think it does. And I would say if you go lower than you're gonna see him go in just a second, you don't get the benefit, any additional benefit to the glutes or the quads, but you do get an enormous amount of lower back risk. You'll notice that he does keep his back arched, right? In other words, if he goes lower than that lowest point, then his tailbone would automatically tuck under, and that's a huge risk for the spine, especially if it's heavy. But that's not necessary for a full squat.
A lot of guys just go shallow, don't squat far enough down, so they're gonna lack that glute engagement. So I always try to squat super deep.
Now see, you can still see his spine is straight. As soon as I touch that button again, he's gonna go back up again. In other words, he's not gonna go any lower than that, and if he did go lower than that, what you would see is that tailbone tuck under and a rounding of the spine. Well, when you round the spine, you basically open up the back space of the spine, and you wanna squeeze with the closing front edge, that soft tissue, that's called a herniation. So a full squat, a full range of motion is good, but there is such a thing as too much range of motion on any body part. You can bottom out on a preacher barbell curl and create risk. You can bottom out on all kinds of things. A flat dumbbell press doesn't have to go all the way to maximum stretch. Full range of motion just means the muscle is elongated enough. And my estimation is that it's elongated about 90% of the way. You go to 100% and you're gonna get into some major problems without any payback.
Always try to squat super deep, no matter what the weight. If I can't get down,
you see that?
I have to back up.
He's still got a little bit of an arch in that lower back. And then he goes back up again. He's also not leaning forward. You see a lot of guys hunching over. Beautiful form.
I'm always thinking about the glute. I'm always thinking about my lower back, keeping my elbows tight, but when I'm going to...
Now you notice here, he's not locking all the way up, right? So that's a continuous tension technique. We can do that on triceps, we can do that on biceps, we can do that on any body part. And continuous tension means that muscle isn't getting a chance to rest. And that means the fatigue builds and builds and builds. And there's all kinds of studies now that show that time under tension and degree of fatigue, especially if it's elongated over a period of time of 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 50 seconds, tends to magnify the sarcoplasm of the muscle, which is the fuel tank around the myofibril, the muscle fiber.
And so I always try to squat super deep, no matter what the weight.
Now, he's only got 135 pounds on there. And I'm so glad to see this, because what he's doing, and he's got beautiful quads and beautiful glutes, right? So, he's clearly could have used a heavier weight. He's being photographed. It's common for someone to say, hey, I'm being photographed, I'm being videotaped. I'm gonna load this bar up so I look my best. I look like a strong guy. But he's not interested in that. He's showing us that you can get a darn good workout on those quads and glutes with only 135 pounds, and he's doing continuous tension, and he's doing reps, and he's doing what you need to do to volumize that muscle. We're here to talk about volumizing muscle, bodybuilding, making muscles grow. We're not here for powerlifting, we're not here for football conditioning, right? We're not here to win any powerlifting events. We wanna make the muscle grow the most that we can. And the way that we do that is by using techniques that we know scientifically, logically work for the expansion of muscle cells.
My foot position is pretty much just about shoulder width, might be a little bit wider than most bodybuilders. I like to have my toes pointed out, and keeping that knee back behind the toe is extremely important.
Now he's talking about the foot positioning, the foot width, which way the knees are pointing out. Obviously the knees will always go over the toes, right? So if your toes are pointing forward, your knees go forward. If your toes are pointing out, your knees go slightly out. If your feet are parallel to each other and they're relatively close, then basically you've got a straight line that comes straight down from your hips, which means your legs are parallel to each other, which means that you're using mostly quads with some degree of glutes. As you start to turn your toes out, you start to create more of an adductor movement, meaning that your legs go out and they go in, out and in, which means you start to get more inner thigh, right? That's not necessarily a good or bad thing. You may want to make your quads or your thighs a little wider if you feel they're narrow, but some people just don't have the flexibility in their hips to rotate their feet forward, and so that is a normal, natural position. So what I always tell people is make yourself comfortable first. Find a position of your feet or a position of your hand if you're doing curls or whatever that's comfortable and natural first, because if you're doing a movement, especially if it's heavy, especially if it's high rep, and it's not a normal movement for you, you're going to start feeling some joint discomfort.
I pretend like I'm sitting down in a chair. You probably heard that a billion.
And you can see he's got a bar here. He's stopping short of that bar. That's a good idea to have some indicator of what would be designated as too low.
You got to stay tight going down and really focus. I'm always thinking about the glutes on the way down, always focusing on the glutes on the way up and the squeeze on the way up.